Hope all of us are doing fine. My name is Ernest, and this is Ernest Sciences and Mathematics TV channel. In this particular discussion, I'm going to look at a series of illustrations. And of course, I'm going to put a disclaimer that these specific illustrative images that I'm going to use are going to be belonging to the Pearson education. And I'd like to encourage our members to visit this specific site in order to find informative and a detailed description on especially the concept of human anatomy and physiology. So in this case, I'm going to use these particular images for illustrative and educational purposes, and I do not own the rights to these specific images as I've already mentioned. So kindly follow us in our channel by subscribing, and also check our description boxes for various links of other videos which we're going to put there, which are similar, of having, of course, the similar topics under discussion. So in this case, I'm going to look at exclusively the small intestines. And of course, as I said, the concept of digestion is a coordinated activity that takes place from this specific opening at the lower part of the oral cavity, and of course, which ends at this lower part of the anal opening through the intake of food and absorption and the final elimination of food through this specific section. Now, exclusively, we're going to look at the overall plan of the small intestine. And of course, they're going to assist us appreciate the overall aspect of digestion, which is taking place from the subsequent sections of the digestive system up to this specific point. And the subsequent organs, which of course are going to be acting or playing a role in finalizing this aspect of digestion, especially on the concept of the large intestine. Now, in this case, we're going to look at the cross-section of these specific intestines, and of course, appreciate some of the chemical, or rather some of the chemical breakdown of food which is taking place at this specific point. Sorry for that. Now, majorly, we're going to see that this particular section of the small intestine, this is going to form the largest part of the alimentary canal. And of course, in terms of length, we're going to see that it's going to be long in nature in order to make the surface area for absorption of food appropriate. Sorry for that. And that's one of the adaptive features that we're going to be seeing associated with this specific section of the small intestine. Now, basically, according to its functions, we're going to classify this in three major functions. And one of them, as we had said, of course, is the chemical digestion of our food, which is going to occur here. And there are several assorted accessory organs which we are going to mention, of course, which are going to be working in collaboration with the small intestine in order to ensure the process of digestion takes place. And these are some of the accessory organs which we are going to see situated at this specific point. And therefore, I'm going to divide this specific aspect of the small intestine into three specific regions, which I'm going to show later in my subsequent display in form of details. But these are going to constitute the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum in that specific order. Now, in this case, for the chemical digestion process, I've said that's going to take place in the duodenum. And of course, in secretion of some substances which are going to be digestive juices are going to be occurring in the stomach, of course, are going to be converted into useful substances or joining with the other secretions in order to form digestive substances which are essential for the body. And of course, the inclusion of other substance or other accessory organs like the gallbladder and the pancreas, which of course are going to be involved in the secretion and storage of some other digestive juices, are going to be very essential in working of this particular section of the small intestine. Now, it's also going to be involved, apart from the chemical digestion and secretion of hormones, the small intestines are going to be involved in absorption of the food which has been, of course, broken down. And of course, this is going to be taking significantly, it's going to be taking part at this specific point. And that is going to be the major role of the small intestine, which is absorption of food. Now, these specific organs, as we have been mentioning, are going to be held in position by serous membranes, which are referred to as mesenteries. And in some final details of this specific section, I'm going to show this particular sense of these mesenteries, which are holding these intestines together to prevent the aspect of tangling. So in my next display, I'm going to show the cross section of this specific small intestine, and of course some of the accessory organs which are going to assist us understand and appreciate the overall concept of this specific section. Now, in this case, we're going to see that one of the major components of the small intestine, which we said is the duodenum. Now, in this specific part, I'm going to show a link of the duodenum together with this specific part. which of course is going to be the bile coming from the gallbladder. So now in this case, I said that the liver is going to be involved in the production of the bile, and of course this bile is going to move and be stored in the this particular section of the digestive accessory organ referred to as the gallbladder, whereby it's going to remain for some times, and upon being concentrated, there's going to be a trigger mechanism that is going to ensure that this particular bile is ejected from the gallbladder, and this is going to travel through the bile duct into the duodenum at this specific point. Now we're going to see that this bile is going to take part in breaking down of lipid droplets through a process referred to as emulsification, and this is going to be occurring at this specific point. So therefore, we are going to appreciate the concept that the effect of accessory organs and in collaboration with the duodenum are going to be forming part of these specific digestion processes. And this is one of the examples of an accessory organ that is collaborating with this a particular section of the small intestine referred to as the duodenum in breaking down of lipid droplets in the process of emulsification. Now, in our next discussion or a subsequent display, we're also going to look at another example, which is going to shed light for us on the coordination of other specific accessory organs together with this specific the gallbladder in order to facilitate digestion. So at this specific point, we can see the supply of blood at this particular point from the this particular mesentery that we are seeing, and then we're going to have this particular section. So this is going to hold the particular organs in place to avoid tangling. So we're going to see that the liver is going to produce the bile, and this bile is going to travel into the gallbladder. Upon a specific range of concentration, this is going to be triggered by the CCK, and it's going to be relieved or released into the digestive system through this specific bile duct. And of course, at this specific point, we see that there's a junction between the pancreas and these specific other sections of the body. Now, in this case, we're going to see that the pancreatic duct as well is going to join at this specific point, and together it's going to coordinate in the release of pancreatic juices which are necessary for digestion. At this specific point, the duodenal papilla and ambula, of course, are going to be located at this specific point. And of course, we can see that the intestinal lumen is being situated at this specific part that we're showing at this point. So therefore, the coordination of activities between the bile duct and the pancreas are going to ensure that the necessary secretions are released and of course taken into the intestinal lumen, and these are going to assist in the subsequent process of digestion, which they mentioned. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have this specific illustration, and as we can see, this bile duct moving into this particular lumen of the ileum, and therefore we are going to see that the junction between this one and this particular openings for the accessory pancreatic duct at this particular point are going to also drain into this particular part of the lumen, as I said. Now, the junction of the pancreatic duct and the bile duct, of course, are going to be situated at this specific point. And of course, we're going to see that these are going to drain into the duodenum, which forms the upper part of the small intestine, as I said. So the chyme that is coming from the stomach, or the pyloric release from the stomach, of course, is going to be mixed with these specific secretions, and they're going to head into the of course, other sections for the small intestine to ensure that the subsequent processes of digestion are taken appropriately. Now, from the middle section, or of course from the pyloric section of the stomach to the duodenum, of course, we proceed to this middle section, which we basically are referred to the jejunum. And this is going to be the central part of the small intestine, which is basically located at the umbilical region. And this is one of the characteristics of this specific region, as we had said, is a rich supply of blood. And this is going to ensure that there is nourishment and supply of course, the blood, to ensure that the uptake of food materials which have been absorbed is taking place appropriately. Now, in this case, this also facilitates the intake of nutrients, water and salt, which are essential for some of the cellular activities which are mentioned in my previous video. Now, one of the characteristics of this wall of the small intestine, as I said, is going to constitute of the circular folds, which of course on their surface constitute the villi, which are these specific finger-like projections which are going to take place in digestion. Now, in my next discussion, I'm going to look at, or illustration, I'm going to look at the finer details of this specific portion of the villi, and that's going to assist us appreciate the overall aspect of this specific structure which is located on the surface of the digestive system, especially on the small intestine. Now, in this case, apart from the jejunum, we're going to see that the final section of this small intestine consists of the ileum, which is mainly, of course, a section that is going to join to the large intestine. But there's one of the characteristics that we had mentioned, of course, of the small intestine, which basically consists of the function of basically absorbing the nutrients and other sections of the components like the bile, which of course are going to be reclaimed later, as I had mentioned, in some sections of the small intestine. And this basically is going to be taking place in this section referred to as the ileum. Now, this specific section referred to ileum consists of this lining, which is a mucosal lining, of course, which is going to constitute this specific part. Now, we can see that this white or a whiter part, which is adjacent to these particular sections of the folders that we refer to as the villi, is referred to as the mucosa. Now, this mucosa lining of the small intestine is folded into some section that we can refer to as the plicae. And the plicae is circular folds which are going to be forming on the surface of this inner part of the small intestine. Now, this is going to contain some projections which I've referred to as villi, which basically the finger-like projections which are going to be forming a larger surface area for absorption of materials. Now, these are going to contain epithelial cells and some cell goblets, which we're going to see later in my final illustration. And of course, they're going to form a basis for absorption of materials and, of course, secretion of materials into the lining of the small intestine, as we are going to see in my final illustration. And this basically are going to form the final set of this subdivision of the small intestine, which I had mentioned for the duodenum, of course, the jejunum and the ileum. And of course, we're going to appreciate that in the finer details of this specific finger-like projection, which I've said, which is going to be an essential part of the absorption of materials in the small intestines. Now, in this case, we're going to look at the finer details of the villas. And of course, this is going to be given in this specific illustration. Now, as I had mentioned, the villas are going to contain these specific epithelial cells, which are, of course, absorptive, in a sense that they are going to absorb materials from the stomach or the lumen of the intestine into the this inner parts, which is nourished by blood vessels and a network of blood vessels and, of course, capillaries, which are mentioned. Now, in this case, we're going to see that this is going to form a section that is referred to as lymphatic capillaries of this section that we refer to as a lacteal. And this is a greener section which we are going to see at this specific point. So this is going to form an integral part of this particular section refers to as the villi. And in a sense, this is going to act as one of the major finer sections of the absorptive area of the small intestine that we're going to see later. Now, I've mentioned the concept of goblet cells, of course, in my previous discussion, and I'm not going to repeat on the same. But this basically is the inner section of these villas, which we said are the finger-like projections on the surface of the alimentary canal, which are going to be involved in absorption of materials and minerals. So in this case, this basically forms the last bit of the small intestine. And of course, we're going to see that there are some common features which we are going to see across these alimentary canals, which, as I've mentioned, of course, like a cross-section, which are going to play similar roles. Now, as we move to the larger intestine, of course, we're going to see the other adaptive features, which are going to be complementing each other and assisting us understand the overall aspect of the digestive system in humans. So that is it for now, guys. By God bless you. Catch us in our next video.